Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Wise Decision Maker Show, where we help you make the wisest and most profitable decisions. My name is Dr. Gleb Tsipursky. I'm the CEO of Disaster Avoidance Experts, the future for consultants that sponsors the Wise Decision Maker Show. And I'm joined today by Shveta. Shveta, can you please introduce yourself and share a little bit about what you do?
Yes, thank you for having me on your show. My name is Shveta Miglani, and formerly I was the head of learning and development and skilling at Micron Technology. And I've been doing this work for almost 25 years in different companies like Google, Salesforce, Palo
Mhm.
Alto Networks, SanDisk, and as I mentioned earlier, Micron most recently. And I'm also an author. One of my books is coming out this summer
Hmm.
through Wiley Publications, so I'm excited about that.
Okay, what book is it? Tell me about that.
Sure, the book is called Navigate Your Career. It is a success strategy for
Mhm.
leaders as they are transitioning. Either they are taking on new roles or they're changing jobs or getting promoted. So, whatever transition that leader is in, that's what the success roadmap is all about.
Excellent. And today we'll talk a little bit more in depth around generative AI at Micron and more broadly, your perspectives on it. So tell me a little bit more about the journey that Micron was on while you were with Micron on adopting generative AI from the very beginning to the time that you left.
Sure. I would say Micron was one of the leaders there. We were part of the chip design, which actually
Hmm.
enhances AI and helps AI to process things faster. So we obviously felt such a part of the whole AI journey, and we wanted to be part of it internally also for our
Hmm.
employees as well as from an administrative perspective. From an HR lens, one of the first things we had to look at was how can we utilize AI at the enterprise level to make life easy for employees, whether that's
Hmm.
finding information on the tip of their fingers, whether there is career coaching or pathing that they can utilize, or even if they have internal talent mobility that they want to look
Hmm.
for jobs that are pertinent to their skills, or if they want to grow in a certain area. So we used that concept and anchored it into a skills strategy that we were building. And
Hmm.
in order to enable the skills strategy, we looked at all the different platforms, and we were lucky enough to
Hmm.
say, here are some AI platforms that can help coach people in real time. Here are some platforms that can help people, or AI level platform that can help new hires in their
Hmm.
onboarding questions and help them find information faster. So
Hmm.
all of that is where we did some pilots, a little bit of experiments, because as
Hmm.
you know, AI is still learning, right? With every
Yeah.
input, every feedback you give, we wanted to make sure it's building that data in the back end. So we did a lot of that from a HR lens. And then lastly, I think the industry has grown so much. I feel like
Hmm.
every time you try to solve a problem, there is some component of
Hmm.
AI over there. And at the end of the day, it all goes
Hmm.
back to data. So, as a decision
Hmm.
maker, as a leader, how can data help me to move faster? So, putting all of those different components
Hmm.
in mind, that's how we did some pilots and experiments at Micron.
So tell me a little bit more about how you overcame resistance, because whenever AI is introduced, there's resistance. I've seen it often from employees worried about job loss or job disruption to their current job, or maybe they have expertise, maybe they're experienced employees in their 50s and they've had a lot of expertise in an area, and now they can feel that their expertise is upended by the introduction of generative AI. What did you do to overcome the resistance that's natural in association with generative AI?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I would say when we were working and when it came out last year in 2024, right, that's when the big news dropped about ChatGPT as one of the best AI, generative AIs that we had out there. Our initial discussions with our employees were they were excited about it, honestly speaking,
Mhm.
because they were seeing it as a product being launched in the
Mhm.
industry. And most of the people that we work with in our company are technical leaders. So from that
Mhm.
perspective, they were excited. But when it came to changing their behaviors, when it
Yeah.
came to changing how I use performance management tool or how I use this
Mhm.
data, how do I look at predictive and analytics when it comes to talent, right? Those were
Mhm.
the things that they were not used to. But I
Mhm.
would say kudos to the HR leaders, HR team members. We did a change management effort to
Mhm.
make sure that it's not something that comes next day, in front of you
Mhm.
and you can use AI, but rather we had several conversations. We brought in our IT teams
Mhm.
together. And again, kudos to the IT team. They did a lot of training. We were a
Mm,
Microsoft product, so we liked using
mhm,
Microsoft products. So Microsoft Copilot was
mhm,
something that was
mhm,
placed. But what I loved about Micron and its leadership decision was we didn't get up one morning and say, "Oh, that's it. Let's launch AI tomorrow because we have
mhm,
to be in this rat race." They didn't do that.
mhm,
They did their due diligence in the back end. They made sure that
mhm,
they've tested the information that, especially with IP
mhm,
and so much engineering work that's happening, you don't want everything to be out there. So kudos to
sure.
them. They thought through it, they experimented it, and then they
Mhm,
provided it as an enabler for the employees
mhm,
to make sure that they can use it faster. And secondly, from an adoption standpoint, it was our leaders who messaged it during their staff
mm,
meetings, during their town halls. One of the leaders would say, I'm using Microsoft Copilot to actually help me every morning to go through
mm,
my emails pretty quickly. It helps me to create my itinerary for the day. It helps me to
mhm,
create this. So the messaging, when it came from the leaders, also, it felt like
mhm,
that's right, they are using it. And look how efficient they are
mm,
becoming, right? How quickly they are getting things done. So all of that created that excitement with our
mhm,
employees.
mhm,
I don't think we ever felt that, oh, this is going to take our job. From
mhm,
the start, because we were dealing with a group of people who have seen the advent of AI,
mm,
they were actually excited. In fact, we couldn't move fast enough for them. They wanted
mm,
more and more from us. So I would say Micron is one of those few leaders where we didn't
mhm.
see employees feeling any kind of threat, but rather getting excited to use it.
Excellent. Now, what were some of the concerns? So it sounds like that's not a threat, but there are, of course, a number of other concerns with AI, things like data privacy, things like security, things like bias, things like hallucinations. What about those sorts of things? Were there any concerns raised around those? And if so, how did you address them?
Yes, everything you said, each bullet point that
Mm,
you said is definitely part of the due diligence. And that is
mm,
something where I'll say our IT team did a fantastic job of
mhm,
bringing those upfront in front of us, telling us this is not perfect, telling us
mm,
that we have to train, right? These are LLMs. They need to be trained in the back end to
mhm,
make sure if they're giving feedback or they're giving answers, are they correct or not?
mhm,
So with that, ethics became such a big part of our discussion.
mm,
And our legal teams also played a big part in this,
mhm,
giving us guidance, giving us benchmarking information to saying what is the world doing, which direction are they going, how
mhm,
can we protect our employees, but at the same time give them tools that can help them move forward. So those were the concerns, but I would say luckily, because the team did so much work upfront, they were able to create governance around it. They were able to say,
mhm,
yes, we can do this. Maybe the other things we are still learning. And then making sure the accountability was in the hands of the employee,
mm,
sorry, not just the employer, but the employee
mhm,
also. Just like ethically, with integrity, you're expected to work in your workplace every single day.
mhm,
Similarly, if a chat GPT or in this case, Microsoft Copilot was given to you,
mhm,
how would you use it in a smart way, right? So that's where I
mm.
think the IT team did a great job in giving examples, the do's, the don'ts, and a lot of guidance. So everybody came together to help make sure that the employee knows how to utilize it.
Now, you mentioned governance. Tell me a little bit more about the governance structures that were set up at Micron to make the right decisions, the right policies, that provide the right guidance on generative AI usage.
Yeah, I would say I didn't have a lot of visibility into it because
Mm,
our IT teams and legal teams
mm,
manage that. But I would say whatever was shown to us as an employee, as a leader, really made sense.
mhm,
It was basic practices. I would say something that which has a lot of logic behind it
mhm,
and something that was easy to utilize. So that's my exposure to the governance part of it. Sorry,
mhm,
I can't add anything more there, but it
mhm,
was something that, again, I would say we were leading the way in making sure that we just don't get into the rat race, but rather we do
mhm,
our due diligence to make sure our
mhm.
employees, our knowledge, our products, everything is safe.
Now, you, of course, were involved in training people on how to use generative AI. So let's talk a little bit about that. You mentioned training the AI. You need to train the people too. Tell me a little bit more about your approaches to training people on using generative AI.
Yes, so I would say the partnership was with the IT team. They were the main
Mm,
leads in this because it was a lot of technical work around that. So what we
mhm,
did is, from an HR perspective, we have our Micron University, which was something that was a digital platform available for employees globally in all the
mhm,
different countries that we were in. So the idea with the IT team was to make sure that generative AI training that happens is consistent, is something that they can understand. What, again, I mentioned this earlier,
mhm,
the do's and the don'ts, what can be done, and prompts, right?
mhm,
Basically, the biggest change from a behavior standpoint we had to make was to say this is not a search engine. When you go into a
mm,
search engine, you ask a different question versus when you
mhm,
go to ChatGPT, or like I said, we didn't use ChatGPT, we used
mhm.
Microsoft
Microsoft
Copilot.
Copilot.
uh, what what question are you asking? And
Mhm,
after every time you get a response, it asks, the system asks,
mhm,
is this what you were looking for? You can do a thumbs up, thumbs
mm,
down. So you're training the system also,
mhm,
right? So those are the concepts that we were teaching people. And I would say it's
mm,
like literally, like nobody teaches you how to browse within a website, right? Once you know how
mm,
websites are designed, then you know exactly what the
mhm,
second click is, third click is. Once we gave them the guidance of this is how you start, these are the main components, people were ready to jump in and really
mhm,
enjoy the experience. So our training was not advanced or really high there. We said, here's the foundation, go experiment and see
mhm,
how in your day you can utilize Microsoft Copilot, right? It was not a
mhm.
mandate, but it was just an additional tool.
Now, did you work together best practices and use cases and share them? I've seen that, so I've helped a number of firms figure out how to adopt generative AI, and I've seen that be a useful tool of a centralized venue for use cases that people can share and then learn from. So I'm curious if you did something like that, or if you had some uh, best practice discussions where people can share, here's what I did and here's what I think can be useful. I'm curious how you shared in the information on how to individual people use generative AI effectively across the company.
Yeah, I don't have visibility into it. The IT
Mhm.
team and we actually have an AI team that did most of that. So because
Mm,
that was so technical and they wanted it to be in the right group of people, they led it
mhm,
basically. We were more of
mhm,
the messengers from a training side
mm.
standpoint. So yeah, but it was done very well.
Now, as we're thinking about how AI is going to develop, where do you see it going? What do you see is going to happen with generative AI? How is the impact going to further expand and shape companies going forward?
I would say a lot of it is around leadership and manager development because
Mm,
today a lot of teams like L&D and HR are unable to scale a lot of those offerings to
mm,
global sites or to leaders that we are hiring all the
mm,
time. And we end up going to the old traditional ways of management fundamentals, which is not bad. I think it's a great stepping stone. But AI can be utilized in so many different ways in giving people coaching, in giving
mm,
people a chance to, have a safe space to practice one-on-one. If
mm,
I'm a leader and if I have to give you any kind of feedback, there are platforms now that can actually give me some feedback
mm,
on how I am talking to my client. What words am I using?
mm,
Am I looking at their body language? What's changing?
mm,
So there are so many opportunities for us to
mm,
take the AI model and expand it, but
mm,
all in a positive way, right? Now, I'm not saying we take the human element out. That can never happen.
mm,
These are indicators. These are ways for us to move from this direction to that. And AI can
mm,
really help us. But at the end of the day, we need the human factor to come in to
mm,
say, oh yeah, that example made sense, or that did, right? So that piece of it, the critical thinking still is there, but it'll help us through the day to move faster, especially companies where managers
mm,
have 10, 15, even 20 reports at one time.
mm,
And when performance management comes up through the year, it is time
mm.
consuming for them to sit down and write
Okay.
performance feedback. So there are really nice platforms out there that not only
Mm,
help you to learn how to give feedback, but they also document that
mhm,
immediately as you're talking within the system so
mhm,
that when that's tied into compensation, they have the documentation correct. So I think there are so many elements that we can feed into and enable, and we just have to make sure we are doing it constantly, iterating and getting
mm.
better. I think that's where AI is really heading.
Excellent. Are there any last words that you wish to share about generative AI adoption that we haven't yet talked about?
No, I think we covered everything, the ethics part, the governance, where we are today and where we are going. So I love this discussion, but thank you for having me.
And thank you to the audience for checking out another episode of the Wise Decision Maker Show. Please make sure to subscribe wherever you checked out the show and leave a review. It helps other people discover the show and helps us improve the show. And if you have any questions, email me at gleb, Gleb, at disasteravoidanceexperts.com.